So what is your Corona resolution? I mean, I know you have them. You may not know you have them, but they're starting to take shape. And what I mean by a Corona resolution, let's consider it to be New Year's, right? There's a new year coming. You've got these goals, these ideas, these things you want to do. Well, now we're stuck in our homes for the most part. And we get a lot of time to think. We get a lot of time to look at our lives and we think, I think I need to make some changes. I think I'm going to do something new. I've got new goals, new things I'm searching for. Now, I'm not talking about what's probably happening. I'm not talking about you taking up making sourdough bread. I'm not talking about starting a garden. I'm not talking about working out more, drinking more water, some of the things you're already doing in your house. I mean, when the doors are open and you can leave, what is it that you have a resolution to do different? What's a new goal you have or something that you want to change? I've been talking to a lot of people, obviously, as a pastor, and there are so many things that people say. They say something like this. I want a new marriage. Not I'm going to go get married to somebody else, but I need to be a different spouse. I need to be a different husband, a different wife. I want to have this goal that my kids know that I'm present with them. Maybe I'm a little too present right now, but I still want to be present with them. Maybe it's certain family relationships outside of the house where you say, you know what my goal is? I'm going to change that. I'm going to make that better. Or for some of you, you're like, this is toxic. I need to put some boundaries into place. I can't let this rule me. And then it starts to get a little more into your daily life. Maybe it's you're looking at your job going, is this really the job I want? Maybe that job's gone that you had, and now you know you need to look for something else, and you're thinking, I'm going to do something different. I'm not going to do the same job I've always done. Because you know there's a thirst inside of you. A thirst where what you're currently doing is not quenching it. I've had a few people share about their faith and say, my faith isn't where I want it to be. I've had some people share about their identity. They said, my identity is wrapped up in this. That doesn't make sense. So I'm going to make a new goal where that's not where my identity is. I've had others talk about, you know what? I've started going to church every Sunday now, meaning they're watching a video or they're participating with their church or our church where they wouldn't have done it before. Or maybe they did it for a while and they just kind of faded out and they said, you know what? I have a new goal to come back to that. I want to come back to church. So I don't know what your resolution is for you, but if you have a resolution, that's really just another way to say a goal. And a goal is a thirst. It's, I want to get there and there's nothing going to keep me from doing it. I remember we were in Yosemite and we had just gotten there and there was snow on the path up to Half Dome. And my son heard about Half Dome. I shared my stories. My wife, Steph, shared her stories about our hikes. And he just got this thirst. He had to have it. He knew that's what he needed to do. And we said, but you can't go, man. Like, they won't let you up. And he didn't want to take that as an answer. So, no, we didn't break the rule. We didn't cross over and try to hike Half Dome in the snow. But we came back because he needed to satiate that. There was something inside of him that said, this is what I need to do. He was dehydrated and he thought that that would meet the need, but it didn't. Then soon enough, another thing popped up that he had to do. But when we talk about this thirst, which connects with goals, we need to remember what it means to be thirsty. I don't mean just like, I think I want some water, or I want this drink, or I want that drink. It's more when we get to the point where the water that sustains our life is being drained, and we know it needs to be replenished. Because water, we're a high percentage of water. I don't want to try to experiment. I can't remember exactly which percentage. But we're enough water that we need it. And in a spiritual sense, and by the way, you can't separate the physical and the spiritual. We're one. But there's this other element to us where we need real water. And we're thirsty for it. And so when we look at this passage here, as we've been going through Psalm 23, we get to David, King David, looking back to when he was shepherd David, and he looks at his life and he says, he, meaning God, leads him beside still waters. Now, the thing about this is we're looking at David talking about himself as a shepherd with sheep, but we don't know anything about sheep. For me, I'm from Southern California. I've traveled, I've seen sheep, but I don't grow up with them. I don't know how it works. If you want to ask me about sheep, I can tell you about petting zoos. I can tell you about having to wash your hands after you're with all those animals. And I can tell you about gyros. That's what I know about sheep. And so it's important that we step back, and when we hear David sharing this, the more that we know about the reality of David's life as a shepherd and the condition of sheep being led beside still water, it makes more sense to the thirst that we have inside of us. So for sheep, it may seem nice and gentle and serene when he says that my shepherd, my God, has led me beside still waters. But what he means by that is different than what we would picture as gyro-eating people. What he means is he would get up early with his sheep, because sheep will naturally wake up early. They wake up early because they can go several months without actually drinking water. Because where David was a shepherd, there was very little water, as we've talked about. And so they would wake up early because that is when the dew would fall. And so they could go for months. The only thing they're doing is eating and drinking from the dew that's on the leaves. And so they would wake up early and usually get that. But sometimes, because they were with the good shepherd, the shepherd would lead them to still waters. Sometimes it was a well, and sometimes it was a stream like this. It couldn't be a dramatic stream. It had to be still waters because, as we talked about last week, they're so easily frightened. They're so skittish. So they needed to know it was peaceful. The still waters. And sheep need to have a shepherd, a good shepherd, that knows where to take them for the dew and to take them to the streams. Because if they are left to themselves, when they get thirsty, if not led, they will just wander out and look to where any water is lying. They'll look for potholes of water. But here's the thing about sheep. They don't have outhouses. They just go where they want to go. So in these little potholes, you have stagnant water. You'll have bugs, nematodes, all kinds of parasites, and you'll have feces. But because the sheep are so thirsty, they'll reach for anything and not wait for their good shepherd to take them to the still waters. So when we look at this, we can think, well, I don't really need to know about sheep. Well, it's God's primary metaphor for his relationship with his people of Israel and his people, us. Over 700 times in the Bible, sheep are described. They're the primary animal, but it's also the primary relationship, because the relationship of a shepherd leading his sheep and taking care of his sheep is the way God looks at us. And it's the way David looked when he was describing his life, not just his past life, but his current life. He said, the Lord, when I'm thirsty, he's the one that leads me beside still waters. And I know what it is to drink from the potholes. I know what it is to get sick from these other things that I'm reaching for and not trusting him to lead me to the true, life-giving, pure streams of living water. Jesus knows that we're going to get thirsty. I mean, he just knows, because he knows us. Jesus called himself the Good Shepherd. And as he's describing himself in John 7, he also says this. He says, if any of you is thirsty, come to me. Now, when he says anyone, he means everyone, anyone that wants to. Because he is the one that gives us that true life, but we can reach for other things. And it doesn't mean that all the other things are bad. But what Jesus is saying, if you're thirsty, let me lead you. All those, like, for example, for us right now in this current situation, in quarantine or whatever your situation is as you're watching this, We're reaching for other things. And Jesus is saying, look, just trust me. Listen to my voice and I will take you. When sheep have a shepherd, they know the shepherd's voice. There's a story, I got it from this amazing book. I'd love for you to read it or you can listen to it. That's what I'm doing right now. Margaret Feinberg, and she wrote this book called Scouting the Divine. And my friend told me about it because he'd been watching these sermons on Psalm 23. And she talked about this shepherd named Lynn in Oregon. And she had, at this time, a couple dozen sheep. And it grew a little bit, but she wanted to keep it a certain size so she could care for her sheep. And so the author was concerned because she said, Jesus said, my sheep hear my voice and obey me. But what if I go to see this shepherd and she calls her sheep and they don't actually come? What if they kind of take their time to get there? And so Lynn takes her outside because she went there for a weekend to learn how this worked. And she walked outside, and I thought she would have this amazing whistle or call or clap and all she did was walk outside and go, sheep, 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 sheep. They're up on the hills, they're scattered around the property. But as she yelled that, she didn't have to scream. She just said it so it could be heard. Sheep, sheep, sheep. They heard her voice and they came. And so they come by and she put out her hands. I mean, what kind of picture is that, right? She puts out her hands and they come and they nuzzle next to her hands. All of the sheep come. The ewes, which are the female sheep, the little lambs, even the rams. And there was a llama. I guess the llama, whose name was Haley, she kind of thought she was like a sheepdog. So she led the way and they all came and surrounded her. So when Jesus says, my sheep hear my voice, I know them and they follow me. This is the picture we should look at. When God calls our name, do we recognize his voice? Do we come to him? So I heard this story and I thought for myself, I said, you know what? Am I his? Right now, am I listening for his voice? As I'm setting my goals, as I'm setting my Corona resolutions, am I listening to his voice or am I running ahead of him to these potholes? You know what? I'm going to change this and I should do this. And you know what our family should do? We should do this. But I need to step back and say, Lord, I will wait. Let you be my shepherd and let you direct me to those still waters because you know my thirst and you know what will actually quench it and will not make me sick. So during this time, we have a lot of decisions. We have a lot of things we need to figure out, and we're given that opportunity. Again, this is a time of opportunity. We have these decisions to make on how we're going to move forward. One of the concerns that I hear a lot from people is certainty. In fact, when I'm watching TV and they say, during these uncertain times, I get so irritated because these aren't uncertain times. They don't have to be. If people would only know that Jesus is saying, look, if you're thirsty, come to me. I will take you to the still waters. I will take care of you. I will lead you to green pastures. I will give you that calmness so that you can rest, so you can be content, so you can flourish. So when Jesus calls us and we come to him, that thirstiness, that thirst for certainty will then present itself. Because one of the things we're thirsty for is certainty. So many people I know, including myself, feel the shifting ground of what's happening right now. And I then want to grab onto something. I want to go find a pothole or any kind of water possible to fill that, even as I plan ahead. But we need to slow down and we need to say, you know, who's really in charge? Now, I don't know who it is for you. If you haven't made the decision to make Jesus your shepherd, that's your choice. Nobody can talk you into that. But I want you to ask the question, is he calling me? is this Jesus who I'm hearing about, or I've heard about, or I've walked away from, is he calling me? Am I his? Jesus said, anyone who's thirsty, come. So even if you don't hear that voice, he's giving you that invitation to come. But when we look at what this means to be led, I love the wording there. David says, he leads me beside still waters. Well, the word lead means to guide to a goal. And so what would it look like for us to step back, to wait to hear his voice, and then we move? Or to claim to him, you know what, I'm yours, I choose to be yours, and I want you to guide me to these goals. That I wouldn't come up with them on my own, but that you would guide me. There's one more thing I want to close with. I think in terms of hearing God's voice, that it's important that we recognize how to hear his voice. I would ask that if you want to hear his voice, that you would begin to make it a habit. That when you wake up, that you have a Bible right next to you. And if you have a phone, then you have access to a Bible. And you can read Psalm 23, of course, but just let him guide you. Read the book of John and say, you know what? I want to hear your voice. This is called your word. Or as some translations would say, this is your voice. So I want to hear your voice. So I'm going to come to the word to listen to you. And then as you're moving through your day, and I would recommend if there's any way for you to get in nature to do that. And like a sheep chewing its cud, take that word, that voice from the Bible, and then say, God, are you speaking to me? What would you want me to hear? How would you want to guide me? How would you want to lead me? Maybe he doesn't want to guide you to anything. Maybe he wants you to just sit where you're at, but he will guide. And in this process, it's important that we know the kind of shepherd we have. He says he's a good shepherd. Well, what does that mean? Well, in this world, we have commercial sheep herdsmen, which means they don't really walk with their sheep. The sheep are a commodity. They're only good for their meat or for their wool. And a lot of times for those commercial sheep herders, the sheep are just annoying. They get irritated by them because they don't do what they want to do. But a good shepherd knows their sheep and knows them by name. In fact, going back to Lynn the shepherd, when she walked out with the author and she walked out to the field and they came to her, she started going through them by name. She said, oh, this is Haley. And she likes to think she's in charge. And then she talked about Opal, the great mother. She said this, oh, Opal, she's such a good mother. And she has this raspy voice. And then she talked about Iris, the confident one, that just wanted to do her own thing all the way. But she wasn't angry or irritated with Iris. She spoke about her with tenderness and care and love because these were her sheep. And she also goes on to talk about this one sheep. And I'll finish with this. She said she was supposed to provide ewes for this other family, a group that came, and they were waiting for a ewe from her. She had given away all her ewes, so she went to a friend's and she bought that ewe. And that ewe's name was Piaget. And so she bought Piaget, but she said there was something special about Piaget. She looked into her face and she said, I don't know if I can give her up. But she knew that she had this family waiting on her property. So she pulled up to her property and she actually took the sheep and put it to the side. And she looked one more time at Piaget's face and she said, no, I can't do this. And so she told the group, she said, look, I'll have another one for you soon. But I don't have any left, because she had an immediate connection with Piaget. And she had that with all of her sheep, but there was something special with Piaget. Well, while Margaret was there for that weekend to learn about sheep, she said that Piaget had had twins. I guess they're always twins because they come out at the same time, right? Miguel and Mario. How cool are those names? And she had called the sheep in, sheep, but Piaget didn't come. And so as Lynn is sharing the story of what happened several weeks earlier, you could see the pain in the shepherd as she talked about this, because this was her sheep. And so when Piaget didn't come and the twins were back, she took off into the hills to go find Piaget. And when she found her, something wasn't right. It turns out she brought her back, and they had a vet come, and she was really sick to the point of death because she had an infection in her udders. And so Lynn, at this point, even though she's a shepherdess, she's retired. She's taking classes, she's playing music, she's got things that she does. She has a rhythm of life, and she puts that all on hold. She lays her life down for Piaget because Piaget needs someone there constantly, because if a sheep is left alone, especially when they're sick, they will die. And so she lays down her life, and for the next couple weeks, she just is there nursing Piaget back to health. And that relationship is different now. It takes on a whole new meaning. That's a good shepherd. Maybe this time for you, you can hear his voice, and he's saying, do you know how dearly loved you are to me? I will care for you. I will provide for you. Of course, I'll lead you beside the still waters. I will help lead you to your goals if you let me. But you are valuable to me. And I will do whatever it takes to give you this life, and so you can flourish. But we need to go back to Jesus' words. When he said, my sheep hear my voice, I know them, and they follow me. So if you're hearing his voice, come, let him care for you because he loves you.